Brenna, stop pretending you understand a company you only enter because you married me. Callan Vale, the 35-year-old husband of Brenna Vale, an ambitious son of Ravencairn Meridian Freight's senior port operations director, said it under the bright lights of the company's corporate gala. Around them stood executives, investors, board guests, senior staff, and photographers, all watching as the Silver Raven logo shone above the stage. Brenna Vale, the 33-year-old wife of Callan, and the hidden controlling owner of the $1 billion shipping firm Ravencairn Meridian Freight, stood in a simple cream dress, while her husband mocked her in front of the very company her late mother built. Beside Callan stood Selene Ward, the 34-year-old public face of Ward Lux Imports and Callan's wealthy mistress, smiling like Brenna had already been replaced. At the front table sat Rourke Vale, Callan's 61-year-old father and Ravencairn's senior director of port operations. He watched with pride, unaware that the quiet daughter-in-law he dismissed at family dinners was the controlling beneficiary of the Harrow Key Trust, the ownership structure that protected the company and kept his career alive. Then Callan reached into his jacket pocket. Brenna's breath stopped. In his hand was her missing wedding ring, the same ring that had vanished from her clutch hours earlier, the same ring that belonged to her late mother, Maurice Harrow, founder of Ravencairn Meridian Freight. Callan smiled like it was just gold. Then he placed it into Selene's hand and said, "This belongs on a woman who understands the future I deserve." Selene closed her fingers around the ring. People whispered. Cameras flashed. Rourke did not stop his son. Tavia Vale, Callan's younger sister and Brenna's longtime family critic, smiled. Drex Mallow, Rourke's finance ally inside Ravencairn, looked at the floor. Oric Ward, Selene's brother and the desperate owner of Ward Lux Imports, watched the ring as if he had just recognized something dangerous. Brenna did not scream. She did not beg. She only looked at Callan and said, "You never knew who was protecting you." What Callan did not know was that Brenna's ownership was not a fantasy, a rumor, or a hidden family boast. It was legally held through the Harrow Key Trust, recognized by Ravencairn's board, protected by attorneys, and kept out of public view so outsiders could not exploit the founder's daughter. He did not know her internal auditor had already traced hidden approvals, suspicious expenses, and private routing favors tied to Selene's company. He did not know his father's authority, his own corporate future, and his mistress's access were all standing on the silence of the woman he had just humiliated. That night, Brenna did not go home to cry. She went to the old Harrow archive beneath Ravencairn's first headquarters, signed her full name as Brenna Maurice Harrow, and activated the emergency authority her mother had left for the day kindness stopped being protection. The next morning, Callan walked into Ravencairn headquarters expecting Brenna to apologize. Instead, the lobby screens went black. Emergency board session, controlling shareholder present. Minutes later, Callan entered the boardroom and found Brenna seated at the head of the table. A folder marked Harrow Key Trust, Majority Ownership Authority sat in front of her. Brenna looked at him and said, "You gave away my ring inside my company. Now let's discuss what else you stole." Some betrayals do not destroy a quiet woman. They wake up the power she was merciful enough to hide. Stay with this story until the end, because the wife Callan mocked is the same woman who owns the $1 billion shipping firm his father operated at, and with one boardroom meeting, she will cost him his mistress, his family protection, his father's position, and the future he thought he had stolen. Subscribe now and comment "Power" if you believe loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. The alarm screamed through the fog before the sun had fully risen. A red warning light spun above Ravencairn Meridian Freight's east-loading dock. Somewhere beyond the mist, a crane groaned, chains rattled, and a stack of steel containers shifted with a deep metal cry that made every worker turn at once. Brenna Harrow Vale, 33, the quiet wife of Callan Vale and the hidden controlling owner of Ravencairn Meridian Freight through the Harrow Key Trust, did not run. She stepped forward. Her plain grey coat snapped in the cold wind as she lifted one hand and shouted, "Stop the line!" The dock supervisor froze for half a second. Most of the younger workers knew her only as Mrs. Vale, the soft-spoken daughter-in-law of Ravencairn's senior port operations director. They did not know why her voice carried like someone used to being obeyed, but the older workers heard it. Hale Voss, a 58-year-old senior dock worker who had served Ravencairn since Maurice Harrow's final years, looked up from the loading rail and whispered, "Miss Harrow." Then he quickly lowered his eyes as if the name itself was a secret he had not meant to release. The crane stopped. The chains stilled. A loose locking pin was found before the upper container could shift again and crush the dock crew beneath it. No one was hurt. The danger passed, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the fog. Brenna lowered her hand and took a slow breath. She had not come to the port to give public orders. Not yet. In Raven Kayan's safety rules, any worker could stop a line if danger appeared, so no one could accuse her of pretending to hold an operations title. But the way the older workers looked at her made the truth harder to hide. She had come before dawn for the annual memorial bell ceremony, the quiet tradition her mother started years ago for dockworkers who died at sea, in storms, or in port accidents before stricter protections were built. At Raven Kayan Meridian Freight, most people saw ships, contracts, routes, and money. Brenna saw names, faces, families, empty chairs at dinner tables. She walked toward the black stone memorial wall near the edge of the private port. White flowers rested in her arms. The first bell of the morning had not rung yet, but the sea was already awake, pushing grey water against the dock. The wall carried 37 names. Brenna knew all of them, not because anyone expected her to know, not because Callan cared, not because Rourke cared. She knew because her mother had taught her that a shipping empire was never built by ships alone. It was built by people who woke before sunrise, worked through storms, missed birthdays, and came home smelling of salt and diesel. Brenna placed the flowers beneath the first name. Lior Penn, a 22-year-old junior dockworker at Raven Kayan and the son of a retired crane operator, hurried toward her with a clipboard pressed tightly against his chest. His fingers bent the paper at the corners. When he saw Brenna's face, he fumbled. The clipboard slipped from his hand and slapped against the wet concrete. "Sorry, ma'am," he said quickly. "I didn't know you still came." Brenna bent and picked up the clipboard before he could. Her voice softened. "Someone has to remember who built this place." Lior stared at her, confused by the weight in her words. To him, she was Callan Vale's wife, a quiet woman, a polite woman, the kind of woman people nodded at during company events and forgot seconds later. That was what Brenna had allowed them to believe. A bell rang once. The workers removed their caps. The port fell still. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. As the sound faded, Brenna looked across the harbor. 3 Raven Kayan cargo ships sat in the mist, their black hulls marked with the silver raven crest her mother had designed by hand. Every ship carried her bloodline. Every office tower, dock gate, private terminal, and contract route belonged to Raven Kayan, the company Mari's Harrow had built from one old vessel and a debt no bank wanted to touch, and the company Brenna quietly controlled through the Harrow Key Trust. But Brenna lived publicly as Brenna Vale, not Brenna Harrow. That choice had protected her and trapped her. Footsteps approached behind her. Vay Landor, 48, Raven Kayan's internal audit director and one of the few officers still loyal to Mari's Harrow's governance rules, stopped beside the memorial wall. He did not call Brenna Mrs. Vale. He knew better. His voice stayed low. "The reports are getting worse." Brenna did not look surprised. Rourke's division. Rourke Vale, 61, Callan's father and Raven Kayan's senior director of port operations, liked to act as if the company moved because he allowed it to move. He did not know the daughter-in-law he dismissed at family dinners held the controlling power above him. Vay nodded. Priority routing, entertainment expenses, private access requests, all tied to Ward Lux imports. The name landed quietly. Ward. Brenna turned from the memorial wall. How many approvals? 3 confirmed, 2 more hidden under client development. Drex Mallow's finance notes were altered. Drex Mallow, 39, Raven Kayan's finance manager and one of Rourke's quiet corporate allies, had spent years making ugly numbers look harmless. Brenna's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. And Rourke signed, every time. Behind them, the second memorial bell rang. The sound rolled over the water like a warning. Brenna's phone buzzed inside her coat. She took it out and saw a message from Imra Holt, 45, her private attorney and the legal counsel for the Harrow Key Trust, the structure that held Brenna's controlling ownership of Raven Kayan. The message read, "Board authority documents are ready whenever you decide to stop delaying. Emergency notice can be issued with Kaya's certification." Brenna locked the screen fast as 2 junior employees passed nearby. One nodded politely with the empty respect people gave to executives, relatives. He had no idea he was standing 3 feet from the woman who could remove every nameplate in the tower before lunch if the board record required it. Vay saw the message before the screen went dark. "She is right," he said. "You cannot keep protecting them from what they are doing." Brenna looked back at the ships. For a moment, the fog became memory. She was 12 again, standing on this same dock beside Mari's Harrow, her 42-year-old mother and the founder of Ravencayan Meridian Freight. Mari's wore a dark coat, work boots, and a gold wedding ring that caught the morning light whenever she pointed toward the ships. "People will love the crown, Brenna," Mari's had told her. "Very few will love the head that carries it. Hide the crown until you know the difference." At 12, Brenna had not understood. After Mari's died, she understood too well. Relatives appeared with soft voices and sharp contracts. Executives who once smiled at Mari's told Brenna she was too young, too emotional, too inexperienced. One cousin tried to pressure her into selling. Another tried to get close to her only after learning what she had inherited. That was when the Harrow Key Trust was strengthened, keeping Brenna's ownership legally protected and publicly quiet. The board knew the trust existed. The attorneys knew. A few loyal officers knew. But operations staff, society guests, business partners, and the Vale family knew only what Brenna allowed them to know. Years later, when she married Callan Vale, 35, her ambitious husband who believed his father's title made the Vale family important, she kept using her married name in public. She wanted to know if Callan loved Brenna the woman, not Brenna Harrow the owner. Callan held a limited consultant badge through Ravencayan's client relations program, a privilege arranged through Rourke, not a true executive role, but he wore it like proof that the company was already his. So she let him think she was simple. She let him think she was small. She even let him bring her into this company like a guest, while he walked its halls as if his family owned the air. The third bell rang. Brenna closed her eyes until the sound faded. Then another man approached across the wet dock. Kea Danton, 57, Ravencayan's board secretary and an old advisor who had served Mari's before serving the trust, held a sealed folder against his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes carried bad news. "Brenna," he said quietly, "Rourke is preparing a speech tonight." They turned toward him. Kea continued, "He plans to present Callan as the natural future of Ravencayan operations during the gala." Brenna stared out at the water. "He cannot promise what the board has never approved." Kea's mouth tightened. "He is not calling it an appointment, he is calling it a tribute. But investors will hear succession. Staff will hear promotion. Callan will hear entitlement." Brenna looked at the banners being raised across the port for the evening gala, blue and silver fabric twisted in the cold wind beneath the raven crest. "Then tonight," she said, "we watch carefully." Vay lowered his voice. "And if they cross the line," Brenna touched the gold ring on her finger, the ring Mari's had worn when Ravencayan signed its first international route. "Then I stop hiding the line." The founder's portrait almost fell before anyone knew Brenna was standing there. A rope snapped above the Heritage Hall, and the huge covered frame swung hard toward the marble floor. Two workers shouted. One ladder scraped backward. A glass display case trembled as if it might break. Brenna moved before she thought. "Hold the left side," she called, her voice cut through the panic with calm command. One worker grabbed the frame. Another steadied the ladder. The portrait stopped inches from the floor. For one sharp second, everyone stared at her. Then Brenna lowered her hand and stepped back, as if she had only been helping with decorations. She wore a simple cream dress now, changed for the gala, and carried an old leather folder against her chest. Inside were her mother's handwritten notes about Ravencayan's first vessel, first storm, first major route, and first dockworker lost during a winter crossing. Brenna had brought the folder for the company heritage exhibit. Most people in the building did not know that. To them, she was only Callan's quiet wife. The portrait was still covered in a dark cloth. The nameplate had not been attached yet. That gave Brenna a strange pain in her chest. Her mother's face was hidden. Her mother's name was missing. And Brenna, her daughter, was standing in the company as if she were a guest. Callan walked into the hall moments later. He looked at the workers, then at Brenna, and irritation crossed his face before concern could. "Brenna," he said, lowering his voice, "but not enough. This is a corporate event. Try not to hover around like you work in decorations." The words landed coldly. Brenna held the folder tighter. "I was helping with the portrait." Callan glanced at the covered frame. "The staff can handle that." His eyes dropped to her hand. The gold ring was not there. Brenna had removed it earlier at the port after the clasp of her glove caught under the setting while she helped steady a memorial wreath. She had placed it inside a small velvet pouch in her clutch, planning to put it back on before the gala began. Callan noticed the bare finger. He noticed more than Brenna thought. Tavia Vale, 31, Callan's younger sister and one of Brenna's sharpest critics in the Vale family, walked in behind him wearing a silver cocktail dress hours before the gala had even begun. She smiled like she had been waiting for a reason to laugh. "Oh, Brenna," Tavia said, "you do have a talent for looking misplaced." Rourke stood near the entrance with Drex Mallow, Raven Kayan's finance manager, and his quiet corporate ally. Rourke's expression was hard. "Tonight is important for the Vale name," Rourke said. "We cannot have awkwardness." Brenna looked at him silently. The Vale name, they kept saying it as if Raven Kayan belonged to them, as if Maris had not built it, as if Brenna's trust documents were not locked inside the legal vault 3 floors above them. She said nothing. That was the habit that had fooled them for years. Then the air changed. A woman entered through the side doors with the confidence of someone who already knew where she wanted to stand. Selene Ward, 34, a glamorous businesswoman linked to Ward Lux Imports and Callan's secret lover, wore a pale silver suit and a bracelet shaped like a serpent around her wrist. Beside her was Mavis Sloane, 38, Selene's image consultant and gossip ally, who carried a phone like a weapon. Behind them walked Oric Ward, 36, Selene's brother and the struggling owner of Ward Lux Imports, the company trying to gain private access to Raven Kayan's shipping lanes. Selene's eyes found Callan first, not Rourke, not the portrait. "Callan," she touched his sleeve with a slow, familiar hand. "Callan," she said softly, "you didn't tell me your wife would be here this early." The line sounded polite, but it was not. It carried the sting of someone who already knew too much. Brenna watched Callan's face. Something changed there. His jaw tightened. His eyes became bright and guilty. It was the same look he had worn lately when stepping out to take late calls, when turning his phone face down, when coming home smelling faintly of perfume that was not hers. Callan cleared his throat. "Selene is a strategic partner." Oric moved quickly toward Rourke. "Director Vale, I was hoping we could revisit the import volume discussion. Ward Lux can move bigger numbers if we get the right port priority." Rourke looked interested. Drex looked nervous. Brenna noticed both reactions. A small thread connected itself in her mind. Ward Lux Imports, Rourke's division, hidden approvals, Vay's warning from the port. The affair had not fully shown itself yet, but the business corruption was already breathing in the room. A coordinator hurried over and asked Brenna to sign the temporary exhibit intake form for her mother's folder. Callan reached toward Brenna's clutch. "I'll hold that," he said, taking it from her hand before she could answer. "You always lose track of things when you get sentimental." Brenna gave him a quiet look. He smiled as if the insult had been affection. The coordinator led Brenna toward the exhibit case. For less than 2 minutes, her clutch was in Callan's hand. During those 2 minutes, Callan stepped behind the exhibit partition as if answering a message. When he returned the clutch, the velvet pouch inside still looked untouched, but the ring was gone. 2 minutes was enough. Later, Brenna walked toward the executive garage to retrieve a box of old company photos for the exhibit. The hallway was quiet, except for voices behind a black service partition. She stopped when she heard Callan. Selene's voice came next. "Tonight cannot be another promise. You said you were tired of hiding me." Callan answered, "After tonight, Brenna will know where she stands." Brenna's fingers went cold around the folder. Selene asked, "And where do I stand?" Callan's voice dropped. "Beside me, in front of everyone." Brenna could have stepped away. She did not. Through the narrow gap beside the partition, she saw Callan lean toward Selene and kiss her. Mavis stood a few feet away, calmly adjusting Selene's hair as if preparing her for a stage. Oric watched the hallway, making sure no one important came too close. Brenna's breath caught, but she made no sound. The pain did not arrive like fire. It arrived like ice. For a moment, she remembered Callan years earlier, before the marriage, sitting beside her after a failed job interview. He had looked broken then, small, ashamed. "I hate feeling small," he had told her, and Brenna had taken his hand and said, "Then I'll never make you feel that way." Now she understood the danger in what she had done. She had protected his insecurity so well that he began to believe her kindness meant she was beneath him. She stepped back before they saw her. No tears, not yet, just silence. In the quiet hallway, Brenna opened her clutch to steady herself. Her hand searched for the soft velvet ring pouch she had placed there after the memorial ceremony. The pouch was still there, but it was empty. Brenna stared at it. Only one person had held her clutch. Callan. Her stomach tightened, but her face stayed calm. She did not know what he planned to do with the ring. She only knew he had taken it. Her phone buzzed. She called him Ra. "If I asked for an emergency board session by morning," Brenna said quietly, "how fast could it be legal?" Imra did not sound surprised. "It already is." Kea prepared the notice when Vey confirmed the Ward Lux irregularities. We have the quorum language ready. We only need your authorization. A moment later, Vey sent a document preview to Brenner's phone. Unapproved Ward Lux priority requests, reduced freight fees, private port schedule access, company car usage by Callan, Drex's altered approvals, Rourke's signature on questionable routing favors. Cellini's expenses billed as client cultivation. Brenner read each line once. Then she locked the screen. The betrayal was no longer only personal. It had entered her mother's company. She returned to the Heritage Hall alone. The workers had finished hanging the portrait, but the cloth still covered it. Beneath the frame, the temporary plaque read only, "Founder, nameplate pending." Brenner looked up at the hidden face of her mother. "Maybe tonight, Mother," she whispered. Behind her, the ballroom doors opened, and the first wave of gala music spilled into the hall like a warning. The ballroom went silent before Callan even finished speaking. One moment, Raven Cayan Meridian Freight's gala was full of soft music, camera flashes, champagne glasses, and polite laughter. The next moment, every eye in the room turned toward Brenner. Callan stood on the small stage beneath the dark blue company banners, smiling like a man who believed the room belonged to him. In his hand was Brenner's missing wedding ring, the same ring she had searched for in her clutch, the same ring her mother had worn when Raven Cayan opened its first international shipping lane, the same ring Callan had no right to touch. Brenner could not move, not because she was weak, because for one terrible second, her heart was trying to understand what her eyes already knew. The evening had begun only minutes earlier with beauty and poison mixed together. The ballroom was dressed in silver and navy. Miniature ship models sat at the center of each table. Tall glass chandeliers threw light over executives, investors, board guests, photographers, and servers moving between champagne towers. Brenner had entered beside Callan with her shoulders straight and her pain hidden. She already knew about Cellini. She had seen the kiss in the garage. She had heard the promise. She had found the empty ring pouch. But a small, foolish part of her had still hoped Callan would not turn private betrayal into public cruelty. Callan had looked at her cream dress and said, "You look fine, just don't speak too much tonight." Brenner looked up at him. "Are you ashamed of me?" He did not even pause. "I'm realistic." That answer hurt more than anger would have. Anger could pass, contempt stayed. Before Brenner could answer, Tavia appeared with Mavis beside her. Tavia's smile was bright enough for guests, but sharp enough for Brenner. "Brenner, I almost didn't recognize you," Tavia said loudly. "You look like someone's assistant." Mavis laughed and raised her phone slightly, not fully recording yet, but ready. Brenner looked past them and saw Cellini entering the ballroom in a silver gown that caught every light. Diamonds covered her throat. The serpent bracelet curled around her wrist. Auric walked behind her, watching the investors more than the decorations. Cellini looked expensive, polished, untouchable, but Brenner now knew the truth beneath the shine. Ward Lux Imports was bleeding money. Cellini was not here for love alone. She was here for access. Still, Callan looked at Cellini as if she were the future. Rourke soon took the stage. He spoke about family, loyalty, ambition, and legacy. Every word sounded heavy with pride. "Some people inherit comfort," Rourke said, lifting his glass. "Others build influence. The Vale family has built influence inside Raven Cayan." Applause followed. Brenner did not clap. The irony was almost too painful. Her mother had built Raven Cayan from one ship and one impossible loan. Her mother's name was still covered in the Heritage Hall, but Rourke stood there speaking as if the Vale family had lifted the company from the sea with their own hands. Then Callan stepped onto the stage without being announced. Rourke looked surprised, but pleased. Tavia leaned closer to Mavis. Cellini smiled like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Callan took the microphone. "My father taught me that a man should surround himself with people who understand ambition." The guests clapped again. Brenner's hands tightened around the small clutch now returned to her, lighter than it should have been. Callan continued, "For years, I tried to build a future with someone who preferred small rooms, quiet corners, and simple dreams." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Brenner felt the room begin to turn toward her. Callan looked directly at her now. "I used to think loyalty was enough, but loyalty without vision becomes weight." Cellini's smile widened. Tavia whispered, "Finally." Then Callan reached into his jacket pocket. Brenner knew before she saw it. Her breath stopped. The gold ring appeared between his fingers, small under the stage lights, but powerful enough to crush 7 years of marriage in 1 second. A murmur moved through the ballroom. Brenner stepped forward. Her voice broke despite all her control. "Callan, that is my mother's ring." For the first time that night, something human flickered across his face. not guilt, annoyance. He smiled down at her. That ring deserves to be worn by a woman who understands the life I'm meant to have. Then he walked down from the stage toward Selene. Mavis lifted her phone fully now. Auric grinned at first, then slowed when he saw the engraving catch the light. Tavia watched with satisfaction. Drex stood near Rourke with fear in his eyes, but he said nothing. Rourke remained still, not because he felt sorry for Brenna, but because he was calculating how this would affect the veil image. Selene extended her hand. Callan placed Brenna's ring into Selene's palm. The whole room saw it. Selene closed her fingers around the ring like she had won a prize. "I'll take better care of what she never valued," Selene said. The words landed softly, but they cut deep. Brenna did not scream. She did not reach for the ring. She did not give them the ugly scene they wanted. She only looked at Selene's closed hand. "That ring opened the first Ravencairn shipping lane," Brenna said quietly. Callan laughed. "Brenna, stop pretending you understand this company." That sentence moved through the room like a match dropped near fuel. Brenna's face changed, but only slightly. Her sadness did not disappear. It hardened into something still and cold. Rourke stepped forward. "Enough, don't make a scene, this is a corporate gala." Brenna turned to him. "No," she said, "it is a corporate confession." The guests began whispering. Callan smirked. "A confession of what? That I'm choosing better?" For a moment Brenna did not see the ballroom. She saw her wedding day, Callan standing before her with wet eyes, his hands shaking as he slid that same ring onto her finger, his voice low as he whispered, "I'll never make you regret choosing me." She had believed him. She had hidden her name for him, protected his pride, let him feel tall in rooms he never knew she owned. She had thought love meant giving him the safety to become better, but love had only shown her who he was when he believed she had nothing. The memory faded. The ballroom returned. Selene still held the ring. Callan still smiled. And Brenna finally understood that silence had stopped being mercy. She looked at him one last time. "No, Callan," she said. "A confession that you never knew who was protecting you." Then she turned and walked out. No shouting, no begging, no tears for them to record, only the sound of her heels crossing the marble floor while the ballroom watched the woman they thought was powerless leave with a secret none of them had earned. At the back of the room, Kea lowered his eyes to his phone and sent one message to Imra. "She has stopped protecting them. Prepare the board." Behind him, the covered founder's portrait in the Heritage Hall waited in the dark, as if Maurice Harrow herself had heard everything. The rain hit Brenna like the sky had been waiting for her to break. Behind her, the gala doors opened and closed, letting out sharp pieces of music, laughter, and camera flashes. Inside, people were still whispering about the wife who had walked away after her husband gave her ring to another woman. Outside, Brenna stood alone beneath the entrance lights, her cream dress darkening at the hem, her bare finger trembling at her side. For 1 second, she almost turned back, not to beg, not to fight, only to take back the ring that had belonged to her mother. Then she saw Callan through the glass doors. He was laughing with Selene as if he had not just buried 7 years of marriage in front of the whole company. Rourke stood near Auric, speaking with the stiff pride of a man already trying to control the story. Drex whispered quickly to Tavia, his face tight with fear. Brenna looked down at the pale mark where her ring used to be. That small circle on her finger hurt more than the rain. She stepped into the back of her private car and shut the door. The silence inside felt violent. For 1 minute, Brenna let herself cry. She bent forward, one hand pressed over her mouth, and the sound that came out of her was small and broken. She cried for the woman she had been at her wedding. She cried for every dinner where she had defended Callan's pride. She cried for every time she had stayed quiet so he would not feel small. Then the minute ended. Brenna lifted her head, wiped her face with the back of her hand, and called Imra. Imra answered on the first ring. "Brenna, call the board," Brenna said. There was no shock in Imra's voice. 7 sharp, yes. Agenda. Brenna looked through the rain-streaked window. Selene was still near Callan, turning the ring between her fingers. The sight closed something inside Brenna. "Ownership activation," Brenna said. "Executive misconduct, emergency audit, contract freeze, evidence preservation, emergency access and disciplinary authority." Imra paused for half a breath. "And the divorce?" Brenna closed her eyes. For 7 years, she had been Mrs. Vale because she believed marriage meant building a life, not winning a war. But Callan had turned her marriage into a stage and her mother's ring into a trophy. "Prepare it," she said. The car pulled away from the gala entrance. Brenna did not go home. She went to the old Harrow archive room beneath Ravencairn's original headquarters, where the walls smelled of cedar, paper, salt, and age. It was the one place in the company that still felt like her mother was breathing somewhere nearby. Nola Reeve, 64, the former Harrow family housekeeper and one of the few people who had known Brenna since childhood, waited by the archive door with an old brass key in her hand. She had worked for Maurice Harrow long before she became Brenna's quiet protector. Nola looked at Brenna's face first, then her bare finger, her voice lowered. "He took Mari's ring." Brenna nodded. Nola did not ask if she was all right. Some pain did not need questions. She unlocked the archive room and they entered together. Inside, the past waited in neat boxes and sealed drawers. Brenna walked to a cedar chest marked with her mother's initials. Nola opened it gently, as if opening a memory. Inside lay the original deed to Ravencairn's first vessel, a black and white photo of Maurice Harrow, wearing the same ring Callan had given to Selene, the early trust papers, and a sealed letter written in her mother's hand. The title on the envelope made Brenna's breath stop. "When they mistake your silence for permission," Brenna opened it. Her mother's words were firm, even across the years. "Do not use power to punish pain. Use it to stop people who confuse kindness with weakness." Brenna read the line twice. It did not tell her to destroy Callan because he had hurt her. It reminded her why power existed, not for pride, not for revenge alone, for protection. And now Ravencairn needed protection from the very people who thought they controlled it. The archive door opened again. Vey entered with 3 sealed audit folders. Kea followed behind him, carrying a board packet and emergency notices. Imra arrived last, her coat wet from the rain, her face calm and ready. No one wasted time. Vey placed the first file on the table. Ward Lux Imports received unapproved priority shipping slots. He opened the next file. Reduced freight fees, private port schedule access, confidential shipping forecasts, event expenses marked as client relations. Brenna looked at the papers, each one turning her private humiliation into something larger. Vey continued. Drex altered the finance notes. Rourke signed operational approvals. Callan facilitated introductions. Auric pushed the requests. Selene benefited through access and expenses. Kea added, "If this reaches the board without control, Rourke will try to bury it as a family misunderstanding." Brenna looked at the photograph of her mother. "No," she said, "he will not bury my company under my marriage." Back at the gala, Callan still believed the night belonged to him. "She'll cry tonight," he told Selene. "Tomorrow she'll apologize." "Brenna doesn't know how to live without me." Selene turned the stolen ring between her fingers. Under the ballroom light, she noticed the engraving inside. "MH first tied, what does this mean?" she asked. Callan shrugged. "Some sentimental nonsense." But Auric heard the words and went still. He had seen first tied before, printed on old Ravencairn founder documents connected to Maurice Harrow's first shipping route. His eyes moved from the ring to Callan, then toward the dark hallway where Brenna had disappeared. For the first time that night, greed looked like fear. In the archive room, Imra slid the emergency authorization in front of Brenna. "It is cleaner if you sign under your full legal name," Imra said. "The trust can act without public confusion. The board will receive notice before dawn." Brenna picked up the pen. The girl who had once hidden her name to find love was gone. The wife who had protected Callan's pride was gone. What remained was not anger, it was decision. She signed in full. Brenna Maurice Harrow. Imra watched the ink dry. "By morning," she said, "everyone in that building will know who you are." Brenna looked at her mother's letter, then at her bare finger. "No," she said quietly, "by morning they will know who they betrayed." Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the gala lights from the windows one drop at a time. The lobby screens changed at exactly 6:58. 1 second, they showed smiling photos from the gala, silver ships moving across dark blue water, and Callan standing proudly beside Rourke under the Ravencairn Meridian freight banner. The next second, every screen went black. Then white letters appeared across the building. "Emergency board session, controlling shareholder present." The whole lobby froze. Employees stopped walking. Security guards looked at one another. A receptionist dropped a stack of visitor badges across the desk. Somewhere near the coffee bar, a cup slipped from a worker's hand and shattered on the floor. Callan stared at the message and laughed once, but the sound came out thin. "Controlling shareholder," he said. "The trust never appears in person." He had arrived that morning expecting whispers. He wanted people to look at him like a man brave enough to choose a more powerful woman. He wanted them to pity Brenna, to believe she had run home in shame after the gala. He had even worn the same watch he wore the night before, as if nothing important had changed. Beside him, Selene stood in dark glasses, her silver coat wrapped around her like armor. Brenna's ring hung from a thin chain around her neck, resting just above her collarbone. She was not wearing it on her finger anymore. Maybe she thought that made it safer. Maybe she wanted everyone to see it without looking too desperate, but the ring still looked stolen. Tavia entered through the revolving doors, carrying a small designer purse and a cruel smile. "No sign of the tragic wife?" she asked. Callan smirked, grateful for the easy insult. "She's probably still crying." Selene touched the ring chain and smiled, but her smile was smaller than usual. She had not forgotten the engraving inside the ring. MH first tied. Auric had gone quiet after seeing it the night before, and that silence had followed her into the morning. Rourke walked in with Drex beside him. Rourke's face was hard, his jaw tight, his anger aimed at the wrong place. He was not angry that Callan had humiliated Brenna. He was angry that the humiliation had been messy. "We control the story," Rourke said. "Brenna embarrassed herself by walking out. By noon, this will be nothing." Drex did not answer. His eyes kept moving to the lobby screens. The message stayed there. Controlling shareholder present for the first time, Rourke did not look proud. He looked careful. Callan noticed. "Dad?" Rourke did not answer right away. "The trust has never come to a meeting in person." "That's what I said," Callan replied. Rourke's eyes narrowed. "No, you do not understand. It never needed to." The private elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed. Every head turned. The doors opened slowly. Imra stepped out first, dressed in a dark suit, carrying a leather legal case. Behind her came Kea with a sealed board packet under one arm. Vey followed with 3 grey audit folders held against his chest. No one spoke. Then Brenna stepped out. She was not wearing the cream dress from the gala. She was not wet from rain. She was not shaking. She wore a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back neatly, her face calm in a way that made the lobby feel colder. On her lapel was a small antique pin shaped like a raven over a wave, the original Raven-Cairn crest. The oldest employees saw it first. An older dock manager near the security desk slowly stood straighter. A woman from vessel scheduling placed her hand over her mouth. 2 board members who had been waiting near the elevators rose from their seats at once. Then another person stood. Then another. Within seconds, the front half of the lobby was standing. Callan looked around, confused and irritated. "Why is everyone acting like this?" he snapped. Brenna walked forward without rushing. Her eyes did not search for approval. She looked like a woman walking through a place that had always known her, even when others did not. For a moment, she remembered being 12, walking beside her mother through this same lobby when the floors were still unfinished and the lights flickered in the ceiling. Maris had held her hand and said, "If you ever take the chair, do not enter as a storm. Enter as the tide, quiet, certain, impossible to stop." Brenna had not understood then. She understood now. Callan stepped into her path. "Brenna," he said, forcing a laugh, "what is this costume?" No one laughed with him. The silence embarrassed him more than any answer could. Kea spoke calmly. "Ms. Harrow is expected in the boardroom." Callan turned on him. "Her name is Vale. And she's not part of this company." Imra looked at Callan with the clean patience of someone who had been waiting years for him to say exactly the wrong thing. "You are correct," she said. "Mrs. Vale is not here on company authority." Then Imra turned slightly toward Brenna. "Ms. Harrow is—" The lobby went completely still. The name hit Rourke first. "Harrow," he whispered. His face changed, as if an old locked door had opened inside his mind. 20 years earlier, he had signed his first executive contract under portrait of Maris Harrow. He remembered the founder's daughter being mentioned only in careful words after the inheritance disputes. A young woman hidden behind a private trust, a controlling beneficiary no one in operations ever met. He looked at Brenna's face, the quiet daughter-in-law at his table, the woman he had told not to embarrass the Vale name. The woman whose company had paid his bonuses, approved his department, and carried his title. The pieces connected too late. Selene's smile disappeared. Her hand rose to the ring chain at her throat. Brenna noticed the movement, but her expression did not change. Callan shook his head. "No, that's not possible." Brenna stopped close enough for him to see that her eyes were tired, not cruel. "It was possible every time you called me small," she said. The words were soft, but they landed across the lobby. Rourke took one step forward. "Brenna, if this is about last night," she looked at him and he stopped. "This is about what was done under my company's name." Drex went pale. Vey adjusted the audit folders in his hands. Security opened the boardroom corridor. Brenna walked past Callan without touching him. She passed Selene too, close enough for the ring to catch the light between them. At the boardroom door, Brenna finally turned. "Callan," she said, "bring Selene." His face tightened. "Why?" Brenna's eyes moved to the ring on Seleni's chain. Since she is wearing company history around her neck, Brenna said, she should hear what it cost. Then the boardroom doors opened behind her, and the room beyond was already waiting. The boardroom doors closed with a sound that made Callan flinch. It was not loud, but it felt final. Beyond the glass wall, Raven-Cayan Meridian Freight's ships moved slowly across the private port, carrying containers through the morning mist like nothing inside the room could touch them. Inside, nobody moved. The long table shone under white lights. Sealed folders waited in front of every chair. Security stood near the doors. The air felt cold enough to cut. Brenna walked to the head of the table. For 7 years, Callan had seen her sit quietly beside him at dinners, in cars, at family events, and at company parties. He had seen her lower her eyes when Rourke spoke over her. He had seen her swallow insults from Tavia. He had seen her smile through small humiliations because she had been trying to protect peace. Now she took the chair no one had ever offered her. Every board member remained standing until she sat. Callan looked around, confused and angry. Selene stood beside him with one hand pressed against the ring hanging from her chain. Rourke's face was stiff. Drex kept rubbing his palms against his suit pants. Tavia looked smaller without laughter around her. Oryx's eyes moved from the folders to the door, as if measuring how far he was from escape. Mavis held her phone, but for once she was not recording. Rourke slammed one hand on the table. "This is absurd," he said. "She is my son's wife." Imra Holt, 45, Brenna's private attorney and legal counsel for the Harrow Key Trust, did not raise her voice. She opened her legal case and placed a document packet in front of the board. "She is Brenna Maries Harrow," Imra said, "controlling beneficiary of the Harrow Key Trust and majority owner of Raven-Cayan Meridian Freight." A heavy silence followed. Ulrich Fenn, 52, Raven-Cayan, outside corporate legal counsel and advisor during emergency governance matters, stood beside the screen and nodded once. "The documents have been verified. The notice was properly issued. The emergency session is valid." Mara Quell, 60, Raven-Cayan's lead independent board member and longtime protector of the founder's governance rules, looked directly at Brenna. "The board recognizes Ms. Harrow's authority." Kea Danton, 57, Raven-Cayan's board secretary and the officer responsible for recording board actions, confirmed the packet in front of him. "The Harrow Key Trust holds controlling voting authority. The chair recognizes Brenna Maries Harrow." Vay Landor, 48, Raven-Cayan's internal audit director and the man who had been quietly gathering evidence for months, connected his laptop to the screen. A chart appeared. At the top was the Harrow Key Trust. Beneath it was Brenna's full legal name. Beneath that were the voting rights, controlling shares, reserved powers, and board authority that held Raven-Cayan together. Callan stared at the screen as if it had insulted him. Then he looked at Brenna. "You lied to me." Brenna's expression did not change. The calm hurt him more than anger would have. "No, Callan," she said. "I waited to see who you were when you thought I had nothing." The words spread through the room like a slow wave. Callan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Brenna looked at him and remembered the man he had pretended to be. The man who once said he hated feeling small. The man she had protected from his father's cruelty. She had hidden her crown because she wanted to know if love could survive without gold around it. Now she knew the answer. Selene touched the ring chain again. Brenna saw it, but she did not reach for it. She did not let Selene see how much it hurt. The ring had been her mother, but Maries had taught her something stronger than grief. Power was not for screaming. Power was for stopping damage. Brenna turned to Vay. "Begin." Vay opened the first folder. The screen changed to a file marked Ward Lux Imports, Priority Access Review. Ward Lux Imports received port priority access without proper board approval, Vay said. The requests were pushed through Rourke Vale's division under Family Operations Codes and mislabeled as Standard Client Development. Oric leaned forward quickly. "That is normal business." Vay looked at him. "Not when the receiving company is financially distressed, connected to an undisclosed personal relationship, and given access to private shipping schedules outside approved channels." Drex swallowed hard. The screen shifted again. One by one, the records appeared. Rourke's approvals. Drex's altered finance notes. Callan's introduction emails. Selene's gala expenses charged as client cultivation. Private port schedules shared outside approved channels. Confidential routing forecasts sent to Oric's office. Rourke's jaw tightened. "Operational adjustments happen every day," Ulrich answered, "not without disclosure when the receiving company is connected to a family member's personal relationship." The word personal struck the room. Selene lifted her chin. I had nothing to do with routing. Imra clicked a small remote. A vendor compliance call transcript appeared on the screen. The recording had been made through Raven Kayan's approved corporate line, where every outside vendor heard the same notice before speaking. Selene's words appeared in black text. If Callan wants me beside him publicly, he needs to prove the Vale name can move freight faster than anyone else. No one spoke. Selene's face changed. Not much. Just enough for her mask to crack. That was taken out of context, she said. Brenna looked at her. Then you will have time to explain the context during the investigation. Mavis slowly lowered her phone into her purse. Sable Knox, 41, Raven Kayan's head of corporate security and the officer assigned to preserve evidence during internal investigations, stepped closer to her. Please keep your device visible, Ms. Sloan. Mavis froze. Callan finally snapped. This is about last night, isn't it? You're doing all this because I embarrassed you. Brenna looked at him for a long moment. No, she said. Last night showed me why I had to stop protecting you. The files show me why I had to protect Raven Kayan. Then her eyes moved to Selene's neck. Now, Brenna said softly, the ring. Selene's hand closed around the chain. It was given to me. Callan stepped forward. It was mine to give. For the first time, pain crossed Brenna's face. It was brief, but everyone saw it. No, she said. It belonged to Maurice Harrow before she founded this company. It is listed in the Harrow estate inventory. It was removed from my personal property and transferred in public while you were standing under my company's roof. Callan stared at the chain. The ring was no longer a symbol of his freedom. It was evidence. Imra opened another document. A property recovery notice has been prepared. Whether Ms. Harrow files a formal theft complaint today depends on cooperation. Selene's fingers shook as she unclasped the chain. The wealthy woman from the gala disappeared in that small movement. Without the ring, without the room on her side, without Callan's false promise of power, she looked afraid. She placed the ring on the table. Brenna did not touch it, not yet. She let it sit between them like the truth. Then Brenna turned toward Rourke. His face had lost its color. Now, Director Vale, she said, let's discuss the port contracts you signed under my mother's company seal. Rourke's mouth opened, but no defense came. Outside the glass, one of Raven Kayan's ships sounded its horn, low and long, like a warning arriving from the water. Rourke's chair scraped backwards so hard it struck the glass wall behind him. That is enough, he said, his voice sharp with panic he could not fully hide. You are twisting normal business into a crime because your marriage failed. The boardroom did not move. The ships beyond the glass kept sliding through the mist below, slow and silent, while every person at the table stared at the man who had spent years acting like Raven Kayan belonged to him. Brenna did not answer Rourke. She did not need to. They touched the screen, and a new file opened behind him. 6-month timeline, Ward Lux access pattern. The title alone changed the room. Callan looked at the screen, then at Selene. Selene's face stayed proud, but her fingers tightened around the empty chain where Brenna's ring had been. Auric leaned back, suddenly less eager to speak. Drex lowered his eyes. Tavia folded her arms, but even her confidence looked thin now. Mavis stood near the wall with Sable watching her phone. They began calmly. This did not begin last night. It began 6 months ago at a private executive mixer sponsored by Raven Kayan's client relations department. Callan Vale met Selene Ward there. The screen showed a hotel lounge photo from the event. Callan stood near Selene, smiling in the way Brenna used to believe belonged only to her. They continued. At that time, Ward Lux Imports had already missed 2 freight payments with other carriers. Their credit line was restricted. They needed faster shipping access without the normal deposit requirements. Auric snapped. That is not illegal. They looked at him. Needing help is not illegal. Hiding that help behind family influence, personal favors, and altered company records is the problem. The screen changed again. Emails, calendar invites, private dinners, expense lines, routing notes. The betrayal, once emotional and painful, now had dates. Brenna sat very still. Each document hurt in a different way. Not because she still wanted Callan back, but because every record proved the affair had grown while she was still protecting his name at dinner tables, smiling beside him in photographs, and pretending not to notice the cold distance opening between them. They opened the first record. A message from Selene to Callan appeared on the screen. Your wife makes you look ordinary. You should stand beside someone who makes people notice you. Callan looked away. Brenna remembered the old Callan then. The man who once said he hated feeling small. The man who had wanted someone to believe in him. She had believed in him so deeply that she never saw when his shame turned into hunger. Selene had not created that hunger, she had fed it. They moved to the next file. A summary note from Rourke's office appeared. It had been entered into Raven Kayan's internal meeting system after a private father and son strategy meeting. Callan should be positioned publicly as the future of operations. Brenner's presence should be minimized during investor-facing events. Rourke shifted in his seat. Brenner looked at him, not with surprise, but with a tired sadness. He had never thought his words would be read by the woman he had aimed them at. He had never thought the quiet daughter-in-law he dismissed had lawyers, auditors, and evidence. Callan swallowed. Dad, Rourke did not look at him. They opened the third file. A spreadsheet filled the screen. Drex's name appeared beside an edit history. Ward Luck's priority adjustment had been changed to client dinner allocation. Drex wiped sweat from his upper lip. That was a classification correction. Imra slid a printed copy toward him. Then you can explain why it happened 12 minutes after Rourke approved the access request. Drex said nothing. The fourth file opened. Tavia and Mavis stood in a side hallway before the gala. Mavis held her phone. The still image came from Raven Kayan's hallway security camera, not from any private device. Beside the image was a message from Tavia to Mavis. Make sure Brenner sees everything. Quiet women only leave when the room laughs at them. For the first time, Tavia looked afraid. Brenner slowly turned toward her. Tavia tried to hold her chin high, but her eyes flickered. It was a joke. Brenner's voice was soft. No, it was a plan. The words were not loud, but they made Tavia shrink. They stepped back from the screen. The affair and the business scheme supported each other, he said. Callan wanted to feel powerful. Selene wanted contracts. Auric wanted financial rescue. Rourke wanted the Vale name to look influential. Drex wanted protection inside finance. Tavia and Mavis helped shape the public humiliation. No one could call it one mistake anymore. It was a web. Callan stood suddenly, his face pale. Brenner, this is getting out of hand. We had marital problems, yes, but you don't have to destroy my family. For the first time all morning, Brenner looked truly wounded. Not broken, wounded. You used my company to reward your affair, she said. You used my silence to build your image. You used my mother's ring to humiliate me. Callan's eyes filled, but Brenner did not soften. I am not destroying your family, Callan. I am removing your access to mine. The room went silent again. Selene turned sharply toward Auric. Say something. Auric's control finally cracked. Why should I? He snapped. You told me Callan had influence. You said the wife was nobody. Selene's face twisted. You begged me to get access. You promised he could move freight faster than anyone else. You told me Ward Lux would collapse without Raven Kayan. Their voices rose, and every sentence exposed more than Vay's documents had. The alliance between brother and sister broke in front of the board. Near the wall, Mavis shifted one hand toward her purse. Sable moved instantly. Do not delete anything, Sable said. Mavis froze. Imrat turned to her. Your gala footage is now evidence in a public humiliation staged around stolen property and corporate access. Preserve it. Mavis's face lost all color. Brenner looked down at the ring resting on the table. It no longer felt like a wedding promise. It looked like proof that Callan had never understood what he held until he lost the right to touch it. Vay closed the Ward Lux timeline. Then he hesitated. That small pause made the whole room tense. There is one more matter, he said. The screen went black. Brenner looked up. Vay opened a final file marked Port Authority Restructure Proposal, Operational Control Review. Callan turned slowly toward his father. Dad? Rourke would not meet his eyes, and Brenner understood before Vay said another word that the betrayal had gone deeper than her marriage. Rourke stood so fast his chair hit the wall behind him again. No, he said, pointing at the screen. That file has nothing to do with last night. The boardroom did not react. That frightened him more than an argument would have. The screen still showed the words, Port Authority Restructure Proposal, Operational Control Review. Beneath the title were draft approvals, board portal notes, internal comments, and proposed policy changes that had never been meant for Brenner's eyes. Callan looked from the screen to his father. Dad, he whispered, what is that? Rourke's mouth opened, but no answer came out quickly enough. Imra stepped forward with a clean stack of legal records. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. 3 months ago, Director Vale supported a proposal to modernize Raven Kayan's Port Authority structure. On paper, it was described as an efficiency measure. She placed the first page in front of Brenner. In reality, the proposal would have moved more contract approval power into Vale's operations division, reduced board review over preferred port access, and allowed certain routing exceptions to be approved without trust-level oversight. The room tightened. Even Selene stopped looking at her phone. Oric's face changed as he realized the scandal was no longer just about contracts. Drex looked like a man watching the last bridge burn behind him. Rourke slammed his palm on the table. The trust was outdated, he said. It slowed the company down. Brenna slowly lifted her eyes. That trust, she said, was my mother's final protection. Rourke froze. For the first time since entering the room, he seemed to truly hear her, not as Callan's wife, not as the quiet woman at family dinners, as Maurice Harrow's daughter. Brenna watched the realization move across his face. It did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces: the trust, the Harrow name, the portrait, the ring. The ships outside, the daughter-in-law he had mocked while sitting inside a life her family had built, and behind that realization came fear. Vey opened another file. The screen changed to comments from Rourke's internal proposal notes. Found-era restrictions prevent operations from moving at modern speed. Trust consent should not be required for routine commercial opportunities. Maraquel leaned forward. Routine commercial opportunities. Is that what you call giving Ward Lux private access while hiding its financial risk? Rourke's face turned red. I made business judgments. Oric answered, business judgment requires disclosure. You concealed conflict, altered approval paths, and attempted to weaken oversight while your son was involved with the beneficiary of those favors. Rourke looked toward Callan, but Callan no longer looked protected. He looked used. Brenna remembered a dinner at Rourke's house months earlier. He had worn a dark green dress and brought a small gift for Tavia's birthday. Rourke had carved meat at the head of the table and said, some women marry into legacy and still bring nothing to the table. Callan had laughed. Tavia had smiled into her wine. Brenna had sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. At the time, she had told herself silence was grace. She had told herself marriage required patience. She had told herself Callan would defend her one day when he was strong enough. But now in the boardroom, that silence looked different. It was not weakness. It was a woman paying for everyone's comfort with pieces of herself. Brenna looked at Rourke without blinking. You were eating at a table paid for by dividends from my company, she said, and still you called me empty-handed. Rourke's face hardened. You deceived this family. No, Brenna said. I protected myself from it. Callan looked shaken now. His anger was fading, leaving only confusion and fear. He turned to Brenna. Why didn't you tell me? The question was softer than before, almost human. For 1 second, Brenna saw the old Callan again, the man from the early years, the man who used to hold her hand like it steadied him, the man who said he hated feeling small, the man she had loved enough to hide an empire from, hoping he would love her without needing one. Her voice softened, but it did not break. Because I wanted to know whether you would still honor me when you thought honor was all I had. Callan lowered his eyes. He had no answer. There was none that could save him. Brenna turned back to the table. The emotional part of the morning had ended. What remained was responsibility. She picked up a prepared resolution from Imraz's folder. As controlling owner, I am issuing immediate actions pending full legal review. Rourke stepped forward. You cannot, Maraquel interrupted him. She can. Rourke looked around the room, searching for someone to stand with him. No one did. Brenna read the first line. Rourke Vale is suspended from all duties as Senior Director of Port Operations, pending a full investigation into unauthorized approvals, governance interference, conflict concealment, and misuse of company authority. Rourke's face collapsed. Drex Mallow is placed on administrative leave and removed from all finance systems pending review of altered internal records. Drex sank into his chair. Ward Lux imports contracts, pending access requests, and priority shipping discussions are frozen until legal review is complete. Oric cursed under his breath. Callan Vale's consultant privileges, executive sponsorship, visitor clearance, and all Ravencairn access connected to operations are revoked. Callan looked up sharply. Brenna Selene looked at Callan then, not with love, not even with anger, but with the cold disappointment of someone realizing the man she chose had no power left to offer. She took one step away from him. She did not stop. Tavia Vale is removed from Gala Committee records, donor relations access, guest list authority, and all company event permissions. Tavia's mouth fell open. Mavis Sloane's recordings and related devices are preserved for legal review. Mavis went pale. Oric Ward is barred from Ravencairn facilities pending investigation. Sable moved closer to the door. Each consequence fell cleanly. No shouting, no insults, No dramatic rage, just truth turning into action. Selene stepped forward, her glamour cracked beyond repair. "You can't do this to me," she said. Brenna looked at her for the first time without pain. "I didn't," Brenna replied. "You did it to yourself when you mistook stolen access for power." Selene's lips parted, but nothing came out. The ring still lay on the table between them. Brenna did not pick it up. Not yet. It had been taken from her as a symbol of shame. She would not reclaim it while standing in the wreckage of people who had never understood its worth. Security moved first toward Rourke. He stiffened when Sable reached for his access badge. "I ran these ports for 20 years, he said. Brenna answered quietly, "No, you operated them." Sable removed the badge from his jacket and placed it against the boardroom scanner near the door. The light blinked red. "Access DENIED. Rourke stared at it as if the small red light had struck him. The man who once controlled the port doors could no longer open one. Outside the glass, a ship horn sounded low over the water, and somewhere beyond the boardroom, the company was already waking to the news. The first video went public before Rourke even reached the elevator. By the time security escorted him through the lobby, every phone in Ravencairn Meridian Freight was buzzing. Employees stopped at their desks. Dock supervisors paused near the loading gates. Assistants whispered in glass hallways. The same video played again and again across small screens. Callan on stage, Brenna standing alone, the ring in his hand, Selene smiling as if she had won something, then the words that turned the whole building cold. "Brenna, stop pretending you understand this company." No one laughed now. The video had not been released by Brenna. She had not ordered it. She had not wanted her pain turned into entertainment. It leaked because Mavis had already sent the recording to gossip contacts the night before, when she still believed the clip would humiliate Brenna. Once Brenna's Harrow name appeared in the morning statement, those gossip contacts realized the clip was no longer a simple affair scandal. It was a corporate earthquake, so they posted it immediately. Instead, it destroyed Callan. In the lobby, people watched the second half of the clip, where Brenna said, "You never knew who was protecting you." Then the new headline appeared beneath it. "Husband gives founder's ring to mistress inside company, his wife quietly controls the room," erupted in whispers. Alden Pike, 44, a business reporter covering corporate leadership scandals and the first outside journalist to arrive at Ravencairn that morning, stood near the front doors with a camera crew waiting behind security lines. He kept asking for confirmation, but no one from Brenna's team gave him gossip. They gave him procedure. Imra stepped before a small press area with 2 board members behind her. Her statement was short and clean. Ravencairn Meridian Freight has suspended certain executives and frozen specific third-party access pending investigation into governance violations, financial irregularities, undisclosed conflicts, and misuse of corporate resources. She did not mention the affair. She did not mention the ring. She did not mention Callan's cruelty. That was Brenna's choice. Even after everything, she refused to make the company sound like a broken marriage. Ravencairn was bigger than Callan's betrayal. It was her mother's life's work, and Brenna would not let gossip become its new flag. But the public already had the story. The video traveled fast. People called Callan arrogant, cruel, foolish. Worse than all of that, they called him small. They said he had mocked the owner of the company his father worked for. They said he had handed the founder's ring to a mistress like a party favor. They said he had not only lost his wife, he had exposed himself. Inside the building, the workers reacted differently. There was shock, yes, but there was also something softer. Respect. Hale Voss, the 58-year-old senior dockworker who had served Ravencairn since Maurice Harrow's final years and had quietly recognized Brenna at the port, stood with 2 younger workers near the lobby screens. He watched Brenna's name appear in the company statement. Brenna Maurice Harrow, controlling owner Hale, removed his cap. "Her mother would be proud," he said. The younger workers looked at him. Hale added, "That woman never forgot the memorial wall. That is why the old crew never forgot her." Those words spread through the lobby more quietly than the scandal, but they mattered more. Brenna was not just winning revenge. She was being returned to the place she had always belonged. Selene's fall came faster. Her phone would not stop ringing. Creditors from Ward Lux Imports had seen the news. Her private access to Ravencairn was frozen. Oric blamed her in the hallway, his voice rising until security forced him to lower it. "You said Callan had influence," Oric snapped. "You said this was our way in." Selene's face was pale under her makeup. "You pushed me to get close to him." "I pushed you to be smart," Oric said, "not to wear stolen history around your neck." Mavis, who had spent the night planning to turn Brenna into a joke, now stood alone near security, while Sable reviewed her phone preservation form. The same video she thought would ruin Brenna had ruined everyone standing against her. Selene finally found Brenna outside the attorney conference room. The ring was no longer around Selene's neck. It had been placed in an evidence pouch, sealed and labeled. Without it, Selene looked less like a wealthy woman and more like someone who had borrowed beauty from the wrong room. "I didn't know who you were," Selene said. Brenna stopped. Her face was calm, but there was no softness in it. "That is the only reason you felt safe being cruel," Brenna said. Selene opened her mouth, but nothing came out. There was no excuse that could make the ring less stolen, no apology that could make the video disappear, no charm that could turn greed into love. Brenna walked past her. In the private hallway beyond the conference room, Callan waited. He looked different now. His suit was still expensive, but it hung on him like it belonged to the man he had pretended to be. His access card had been disabled. His name had been removed from the gala recap. His father was suspended. Selene had stopped answering his messages. Even Tavia would not meet his eyes. He saw Brenna walking with Imra and stepped forward. "Brenna, please," she stopped, but she did not move closer. "I made a mistake," he said. Brenna looked at him for a long moment. "No, Callan, a mistake is forgetting an anniversary. You planned a public execution of my dignity." His face twisted with shame. "I was angry," he said. "I felt like you were always holding something back." "I was," Brenna answered. "I was holding back the part of my life that would have shown me whether you loved me or my power." Callan's eyes filled. "I loved you before I knew." Brenna's expression broke for only a second, just enough for him to see that the woman he had hurt was still human, just enough for the room to feel the cost of her strength. "No," she said quietly. "You loved who I became when I made you feel bigger. The moment you thought another woman could make you look powerful, you traded me for applause." Callan lowered his head. Imra stepped forward and handed him a folder. "Divorce filing," she said. "Asset protection is already established through the Harrow Key Trust. Ravencairn assets are inherited, shielded, and separate. Any personal claims will be handled through counsel." Callan stared at the folder like it weighed more than the building. In one morning, he had lost his wife, his corporate access, his father's protection, his mistress's admiration, his social image, and the future he thought he had stolen for himself. He looked up one last time. "Did you ever really love me?" Brenna's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she said. "That is why you survived this long." Then she walked away, leaving Callan in the hallway with the papers in his hand and the sound of reporters gathering outside. The final report landed on the boardroom table like a sentence. No one spoke at first. The folder was thick, sealed, and marked with Ravencairn Meridian Freight's crest. Inside were weeks of interviews, financial reviews, security records, expense trails, access logs, vendor records, and legal findings. Every page carried the same truth in a different form. They had not only betrayed Brenna, they had used her company to do it. Rourke resigned before the board could vote on his formal removal. He did it through a short letter written by his attorney, but everyone knew the truth. He was not leaving with honor. He was leaving because the investigation had cornered him. The man who once walked through Ravencairn like he owned the docks could no longer enter the building without permission. Drex was terminated after the finance review confirmed altered records, hidden expenses, and changed billing categories tied to Ward Lux access. Ward Lux Imports lost every pending access request. Oryx expansion collapsed almost overnight. Without Ravencairn's private routes, his promises to investors became empty words. Selene's social image fell apart even faster. The same people who had admired her diamonds now whispered that she had worn a stolen ring and mistook a borrowed man for power. Her invitations disappeared. Her calls went unanswered. Her name became linked to fraud, humiliation, and desperation. Mavis lost clients after the gala video exposed her as part of the scandal she thought would make her famous. The clip she sent out to shame Brenna had become proof of Brenna's strength. Tavia sent one email. It said she was sorry. Brenna read only the subject line, then closed it. Some apologies were not regret. Some were only fear wearing perfume. Callan moved out of the marital home 3 days after the divorce filing began. He left quietly, with 2 suitcases and no argument left in him. The house had never been the real prize. The real prize was trust, and he had broken it in front of everyone. The future he had tried to steal from Brenna now existed only behind glass, locked gates, and a company name he could no longer use. Weeks later, Brenna sat in the boardroom again. This time, there was no panic, no shouting. No stolen ring on the table. The morning light came through the glass wall and spread across the long, polished surface like calm water. The board stood when she entered. Brenna did not smile proudly. She simply nodded and took the chair. For years, she had hidden from this seat. She had told herself she was waiting for the right time, the right strength, the right reason, but the truth was simpler and sadder. She had been afraid that taking her place would prove her mother right about people loving the crown more than the woman beneath it. Now she understood something Mary's had not lived long enough to tell her. Hiding power did not always protect love. Sometimes it only protected the people using your silence. Brenna opened the first resolution packet. "My first act as active chairwoman will not be punishment," she said. "It will be restoration." Imra watched from one side of the room. They stood near the screen with the new ethics proposal. Kea held the final board minutes, his face calm but proud. Brenna created a worker emergency fund in her mother's name. It would help families after accidents, illness, or sudden loss. She ordered stronger ethics controls so no executive could hide private favors under company expenses again. She approved transparent contract reviews for all third-party access. She created protection for employees who reported misconduct, even if the misconduct came from senior leadership. Then she announced a memorial scholarship for the children of port workers, funded from the savings recovered after the frozen ward Lux arrangements. No one clapped at first, not because they disapproved, because the room understood they were watching Ravencairn return to itself. Then Mara began clapping softly. Kea followed. They, Imra, the board. The sound grew until it filled the glass room and moved out toward the hallway, where employees had gathered quietly beyond the doors. Brenna lowered her eyes for a moment. She was not cold, she was clear. Later that morning, she walked to the Heritage Hall. The covered portrait was no longer covered. Mary's Harrow looked down from the wall in a dark coat, her chin lifted, her eyes steady, and the sea behind her. Beneath the portrait, the nameplate had finally been installed. Mary's Harrow, founder of Ravencairn Meridian Freight. Beside the portrait stood a new glass case. Inside it rested the restored ring. The gold had been cleaned. The engraving was visible beneath the light. MH first tied a small plaque below it read, "The first tied ring worn by Mary's Harrow at the signing of Ravencairn's first international route. Returned to company history by Brenna Mary's Harrow." Brenna stood before it for a long time. For 7 years, the ring had been a wedding promise. For one cruel night, Callan had turned it into a weapon. Now it belonged to history again. Nola Reeve, 64, the former Harrow family housekeeper and Brenna's quiet protector since childhood, stepped beside her with tears in her eyes. "She would have wanted you to wear it again," Nola said softly. Brenna looked at the ring, then she looked at her mother's portrait. "Maybe one day," Brenna said, "but not as proof that someone chose me." Her voice stayed steady. "As proof that I chose myself." Outside, the memorial bell rang at the port. Brenna turned from the glass case and walked through the corridor toward the dock. Workers paused when they saw her, not in fear, not in confusion, but in recognition. The younger ones who had once known her only as Mrs. Vale now stepped aside with respect. The older ones nodded like a secret had finally come home. At the memorial wall, Hale Voss stood with his cap in his hand. He did not say Mrs. Vale. He said, "Ms. Harrow." Brenna placed white flowers beneath the names. The sea wind lifted the edge of her black coat. The silver raven crest shone on the ships beyond the dock. Containers moved, cranes turned, workers called to one another. Ravencairn breathed around her, alive, wounded, repaired, and still standing. Callan had thought he was giving away a ring. Rourke had thought he was protecting a family name. Selene had thought she was receiving power, but none of them had understood what Brenna already knew. A stolen ring could be returned, a broken marriage could be ended, a corrupted company could be restored, but once a quiet woman remembered who she was, no boardroom, no family, no husband, and no mistress could make her small again. Brenna looked out at the water as the first ship of the morning pulled away from the port. Its horn sounded once. Low, certain, impossible to ignore. And this time, Brenna did not hide behind anyone's name. She stood as Brenna Mary's Harrow, owner of Ravencairn Meridian Freight, daughter of the woman who built it, and the woman who finally took the chair no betrayal could steal from her. If this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment, power, if you believe loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness.